On today's Locked On Giants podcast, there are big expectations for the New York Giants defense in 2025. And to meet those, the Giants need to deliver in these key metrics. I'll tell you what they are coming up next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all our written work. And as always, we welcome on in our everydayers, our Blue Crew community members, our newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And if you're making us your first listen of the day, we thank you for that as well. It is appreciated. And today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when their first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started. All right, folks, on today's program, look, I've talked a lot about the Giants defense of late, and in looking over the personnel that they've added in, looking over some of the stats from last year, I've identified some areas that they definitely need to improve. And some of them you're going to know, some of them maybe you won't know. There's some interesting stat revelations that I came across when doing my research for the show. But I'm going to start off with some context into the Giants' defensive woes last year. Now, what I try to do is I try to be fair. I try to look at both sides of the coin. I try to assess and look at not just at the stats, but the circumstances. So there were things that the Giants defense did well last year. Some of their struggles, though, if we're putting things into context. Number one, it was year one of a totally different system than what this defense had been used to running the two prior years under the Brian Daboll era. So Wink Martindale was gone. Shane Bowen came in, totally different defensive system. And sometimes when you're in a new system, it takes you a while before you kind of get a feel for it and you're able to fly around out there without having to think too much. Number two, with the new system, some guys were kind of out of place. All right. I think of Bobby Okereke, who was so good in 2023. And then 2024 came along, and I know he had the back injury, but there were times he looked like he didn't know what he was doing. You know, should he charge? Should he drop into coverage? What should he do? There were times when he just wasn't playing fast enough like he had the year before. All right, you look at Deonte Banks. They had him covering the opposing team's top receiver. Banks wasn't ready for that. You know, you throw in the new system, you throw in the fact that the new system was more zone-based, and it just led to a perfect storm. And then there were, of course, other things behind the scenes with the coaching and just the whole undermining of Banks's confidence. So that was an issue. You look at the biggest thing of all, and that was personnel. Now, I always go back to the Hard Knocks scene in which they're sitting in Indianapolis at the combine, and Joe Shane's kind of joking around with Shane Bowen, and he says to him, look, I can get you Brian Burns, but that's basically all you're going to get. So Shane Bowen came to the Giants, didn't have the personnel he needed to really do what he wanted to do, I think, on defense. And that led to them jamming square pegs into round holes. And it was not a very good, a good setup at all. So again, when you don't have what you need and you kind of want to run a system, it's really hard. So you got to take that into consideration. And injuries, we'll talk about injuries. Particularly up front, the defensive line was just absolutely destroyed by injuries. That led the Giants to have to rely a little bit more on the youth movement. All right. Now, unfortunately for them, the youth movement wasn't quite as sharp as maybe you would have liked to have seen. That necessitated changing up what they were doing up front. Instead of a two-man line, they kind of went back to a more traditional three-man or four-man front, and they had mixed results. So it was a bunch of little things that kind of melded together that undermined the defense. That said, there were some other factors that the defense just didn't deliver on that they need to deliver on this year. So let's get into some of them. Number one on my list is tackling. Now, this is interesting. I had someone, I think it was one of my Blue Group community members, ask me about tackling and what are they doing to ensure that they don't have missed tackles. And we'll find out when we get to training camp and the pads go on. But let me give you some stats here. All right. The Giants had 106 missed tackles last year, which ranked 14th in the NFL amongst defenses. Now, so that's right smack in the middle of the NFL. You don't want to be, in that range. You want to have as few missed tackles, obviously, as you can. Of the defenders, they had 5 guys who, according to Pro Football Focus, had 10 or more missed tackles. And of those 5, you had 2 rookies, all right, Drew Phillips and Tyler Nubin. Drew Phillips had 11, Tyler Nubin had 10. And then your leaders were Micah McFadden, linebacker. He had 16. Safety Jason Pinnock, who's no longer with the team, he had 14. And Bobby Okereke had 11. So you want to clean that up, obviously, in terms of getting guys on the ground. You miss a tackle and it's very easy for maybe a 2-yard gain to suddenly turn into a 7, 8, 9-yard gain. So that was a big problem for the Giants, and that's something they're going to have to look to address. And I'm curious to see how they do that in training camp, especially when they don't want guys necessarily going to the ground. But it's something that needs to be addressed, obviously. All right. Run defense. We know that was a big, big problem for the Giants last year. So let me give you some stats. I talked about missed tackles. 85 missed tackles against the run. That's a 54.4% missed tackle rate. Again, you don't get these guys on the ground within the first yard or two. They're ripping off 10-plus yard runs. All right. And that's going to drive up or keep the defense on the field. And the Giants particularly struggled against first down runs. So that's something they have to definitely clean up. Their rushing yards over expected allowed, plus 494, first in the league. So that's got to come down, that number. Rushing yards over expected per attempt, 1.04, which is also first in the league. That's got to be addressed as well. They were ranked in the top 3 worst defenses on third and short run conversions. All right. Guys couldn't get off the field. So basically the opponent rushing on third and short, 9 times out of 10, they were converting. So that's got to be improved. And just overall, they're 136.3 yards per game, rushing yards per game allowed, 6th most in the NFL. The Giants, no surprise, added a bunch of defensive linemen in the offseason to fix this. We'll see if that pays off, but clearly that was a big, big, big problem for the Giants. And, you look at Shane Bowen's history before he came to the Giants, his run defenses weren't that bad. So he gets to the Giants, and now all of a sudden they can't stop the run. And you could say it was a lack of personnel, that he didn't have what he needed. Now, supposedly, he's got what he needs. He's got he got a lot of additional talent this year. How he deploys it and what he gets out of it, that remains to be seen. So I'm curious to see how that plays out. All right, I got some more items on my list, and I will get to those right after this. Hey, Giant fans, the NBA Finals are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. Do you have a hunch about who's going to win the finals? Who's going to be the MVP? Who's going to be the top scorer? Why not explore all that and more, where you can win big on such things as player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays? Just think, your first $5 winning bet can yield you $200 in bonus bets to add to your excitement. So if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head over to fanduel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. Coming up on tomorrow's show, the Giants are back for OTA I believe it's number 9. So the media will be in the building. I will be there. I will have observations, takeaways, obviously the media clips, the media sessions. I'll throw in some clips of anything relevant. So I'll have complete coverage for you on OTA number 9. And hey, we're coming up to the end of spring football. Next week is the mandatory mini camp. That'll be on Tuesday and Wednesday. Media is in the building for Tuesday and Wednesday. I'll be there for both days. So still a lot to cover before we take a little bit of a break here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Hope you will stay with me. All right, continuing today's show, we're taking a look at areas that the Giants defense really need to improve. We're talking specific metrics, and I'm giving you details, stats, and trying to kind of figure out what needs to be done and why these stats kind of popped up. So the next item on this list, takeaways. That was a big problem. So let me give you some stats here. The Giants were ranked 28th overall in takeaways with 15, only 5 interceptions, which was ranked 31st in the league. Only 8.3% of their opponent drives ended in a turnover, which is pretty low. All right. I don't have to spell it out for you folks. They need to get more takeaways. You get a takeaway, you put the offense in an advantageous position. Maybe they score a little bit more. The defense has to do its share. Now, one stat I could not find, I looked for it high and low because I know I've been asked about it, is how many interceptions were dropped. Couldn't find it. This year, folks, I'm going to keep that stat to see if it improves or, well, I don't have anything to compare it to, but I'm going to keep that stat and be able to report on that by the end of the season on how they do on that. But takeaways is a huge, huge thing that this defense needs to get better at. All right. Now, the thinking behind why they were maybe lacking in the takeaway department, again, new system. They weren't necessarily flying around until like the second half of the year. So you would like to think in year 2, less thinking, more flying, but we'll see if that improves in the takeaway department, which is so important. All right, let's talk about the pass rush. The pass rush was, it wasn't horrible, but let me give you some advanced statistics here. The Giants ranked 15th with a 34.3% quarterback pressure rate. This despite the fact that they only averaged 2.56 seconds time to pressure, which was third in the league, third best in the league. So basically, the pass rush, you could argue that the pass rush wasn't getting home, or you could even say the quarterback was getting the ball out of his hand quick and defeating the pass rush. It was probably more of that. So how do they fix that? Obviously, they put a lot of emphasis this past offseason on the pass rush, bringing in Abdul Carter, Chauncey Golston. They're getting back Dexter Lawrence healthy. Obviously, Brian Burns is coming back, Kayvon Thibodeau. They're going to have a better pass rush this year. They've got to get home a little bit more with the pass rush. There were times when the Giants, they came with them at a four-man rush, and the four-man rush didn't really do anything. So they've got to do a better job of that. That goes without saying. And the Giants, we'll see if the additional pass rush fire that they've added, if that makes a difference. But that was certainly a big problem for the Giants pass rush. Now, staying with the pass defense, all right, let's take a look at some what the back end of the defense was doing. The back end of the defense, 60 pass breakups, which was ranked 26 amongst all NFL defenses. So basically, guys weren't getting their hands on balls a whole lot. And that's not just a defensive secondary. That's, the linebackers and, the defensive front. One of the big things I've always kind of screamed about is if you're going to be stonewalled up front, if you're the front seven and you're being stonewalled, at least get your hands up in the passing lane. Make it more difficult for the quarterback to shoot the ball through, the forest, so to speak. And the Giants just haven't done a really good job of that. The knockdowns, I mean, they were down at the bottom of the bottom part of the rankings league wide in knockdowns. Get your hands up. It's it's common sense, but I guess in the heat of the battle, guys don't think to do that. So that was a problem. The Giants' net yards gain per pass attempt, seventh highest in the league. They average 6.5 allowed. So that's got to change, obviously. So the Giants' pass defense, better talent. I think the new back end of the defense that they brought in, having Paulson Adebo be on wide receiver 1, that will kick Deontay Banks over to wide receiver 2. I think Drew Phillips being in year 2 of this system, in year 2 in the NFL, that's going to help. Same with Tyler Nubin. Javon Hollins coming in, he should be an instant upgrade. I fully think that this Giants defensive secondary is going to be a lot better in terms of getting their hands on balls, in terms of getting turnovers, in terms of just basically helping the front end of the defense. So really, you want the back end of the defense to help the front end of the defense. And last year, you just didn't see enough of that with this Giants team. And it showed up in their performance and in the stats and in the results, if you think about it. So, all right, I have a few more that I'm going to talk about. That's coming up right after this. Hey, Giant fans, say goodbye to sticky notes, scribble plans on the fridge, and overlapping calendar invites. The Skylight calendar is here to bring clarity to the chaos and help families stay organized without the stress. This sleek digital display syncs with your existing calendars, Google, Apple, Outlook, and more, making it simple to track appointments, practices, dinners, and reminders all in one easy-to-see place. Look, in my line of work, things frequently pop up on my calendar, and quite often there are changes in schedule. Sometimes I'm late getting home from the Giants, or there's breaking news that requires me to delay dinner, or whatever the case may be. And ever since I've gotten my Skylight calendar, which we have in the central location here in our house, I don't have to worry about my husband texting me saying, "Where are you? What's the dinner plan? What time are you coming home?" It's all there on the calendar. And it's the same thing with his schedule. I know when he's going to be out, and so I can plan accordingly. So no more questions about schedules, and it's all there on a Skylight calendar. So if you're looking to bring some organization to your household's busy schedule, give Skylight a try. Right now, Skylight is offering our listeners $30 off their 15-inch calendars when you go to skylightcal.com/NFL. That's skylightcal.com/NFL to get $30 off your 15-inch calendar. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. Again, tomorrow, Giants have OTA number 9. I'll be there. I'll have a report for you. I'll get it done as quickly as I can. So make sure you check for that show. Also, make sure you're following me on social media, on X at Patricia_Traina, Traina, if you want to follow along for tweets. And also check out New York Giants on SI, because we'll have coverage there as well. So we've got it all covered for you. All right, continuing our look at the Giants defense and metrics that they need to improve for 2025. I looked at third down. They weren't too bad at third down. They were ranked 14th in the league. They had a 40.3% conversion rate. I thought it would be a little bit higher, 14th is not bad, but ideally you don't want to, you want to be at the bottom in terms of completion rate allowed. In terms of the red zone, which was another area, they gave up 58.7% of the red zone visits by the opponents. That ranked 22nd. So those two areas need to get a little bit better, I would say. Um, Penalties. Let's talk about penalties, because penalties, I think, were a big problem for the Giants. How many times did we see on third down the Giants look like they got off the field and then in comes the little yellow flag, right? Too many times. So the Giants, the most frequent called penalty on them on the defensive side, defensive pass interference. They gave up 231 yards from defensive pass interference. All right. That was, let me see, that was first in the NFL. So obviously, pass interference, that's got to get cut down. The Giants made a change in coaching in terms of the defensive backfield, right? Jerome Henderson isn't here. Mike Trier isn't here. They brought in a couple of new guys. The hope is that, amongst other things, these guys can maybe cut down, help the players cut down on the pass interference players, the illegal use of hands and all that stuff that came up and bit the Giants at the worst possible times last year. In terms of penalties, the Giants average 10 penalties against. The league average was 9.84. So they were a little high in terms of defensive penalties. That's got to come down. They've got to be under the league average. And the opponent benefit rate was the fifth most in the league, meaning opponents were benefiting at an alarming rate from Giants miscues. Just basically a lot of sloppiness, poor technique, whatever you want to call it. These were all issues that popped up and just need to be corrected by this Giants defense. So that being said, overall, I think the Giants have the personnel now to get everything done. Now, whether they keep them all healthy, that's another story. Nobody knows the answer to that. But it is a critical year for the Giants defense. You know, we look at them and we look at the team and we say last year that the offense was bad, that the offense was a problem. No, the defense was just as much of a problem, as evidenced by the changes that they made to correct some of these issues. So we'll see if that plays out, how that plays out, and if things are better. So on that note, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Giants. Again, I want to thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting. As training camps get closer and moves are being made, your hosts, Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino, will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, Giant fans, that's it for me. I will see you tomorrow. Until then, have a good one.